I was having a conversation about getting to the next level in my career. I expected to hear about skills to develop, technologies to learn, projects worth taking on. Instead, the conversation went somewhere else. I was told about how leaders break the ice, when to make a joke and when not to, how to read a room, how to carry yourself in a way that signals leadership. It was well-meaning. I don't doubt that. But something about it didn't sit right. It took me a while to figure out what it was. It was about becoming a different kind of person, and it was delivered with enough certainty that I almost took it as fact. Almost. The advice wasn't about getting better at the work. It wasn't about developing expertise, building credibility, or earning trust through results. It was about personality. Specific traits, warmth, humor, social ease, presented as the entry requirement for leadership. And the implication was clear. If you don't have these naturally, you need to start performing them. What struck me later was how certain it all sounded. No qualification, no context. This is what leadership looks like. This is what it requires. But where does that certainty come from? A book, maybe. A particular culture. Someone who was told the same thing and passed it on without questioning it. We do this constantly. Inherit ideas about how things work, how people should behave, what success looks like. But at some point where it came from gets forgotten. It just becomes how it is. Ellen Langer, a Harvard psychologist who has spent decades studying how we accept the world on autopilot, calls this mindlessness. Not stupidity, just the absence of questioning, accepting the category without examining whether it's actually true. And I almost did that, took it as fact. If I'm honest, there was a moment where I started thinking about what it would look like for me. Which parts of my personality were missing from that profile, what I'd need to add, not because it felt natural, but because someone with more experience had said, this is what it takes. And when someone says that with enough certainty, in the right context, you tend to listen. What made me pause was more accidental than anything else. I started thinking about the leaders I'd actually worked with, the ones I'd trusted, learned from, wanted to work for again, and something didn't add up. I thought about two leaders I'd worked with at different points. They were nothing alike. One was energetic, direct, vocal, the kind of person who fills a room. The other was quiet, observant. You'd sometimes forget he was in the meeting until he said something that reframed everything. Neither of them fit neatly into the profile I'd been given, but both of them did something that I only recognized later as the thing that actually mattered. They let people make mistakes and still trusted them afterward. They helped without controlling. They didn't lead from the authority of their title. They led from something they'd actually earned. And because of that, people around them weren't afraid to try things. Nobody was performing. They showed up as part of the team. Two completely different personalities. The same essential quality underneath. So what happens when you accept that model without questioning it? You start optimizing for the wrong thing. You measure yourself against a profile that came from somewhere, a book, a culture, someone's subjective experience, and it was handed to you as the standard. And the two people I described wouldn't have scored particularly well against that profile, but they had something that profile doesn't measure: the ability to create conditions where people trusted them enough to actually do their best work. And none of that requires you to be a particular kind of person. It requires you to be a consistent one. Most of these models get passed around without much examination. They sound reasonable. They come from people who mean well, and we tend to absorb them, especially when they arrive with enough certainty from someone with enough experience. The question isn't whether a particular piece of advice is right or wrong. It's whether we stop to ask if it actually applies to us.